We'll start with the NFC East. Dallas Cowboys, most important offseason addition now heading into 2021.
So this feels a little cheaty, but it's Dak. Getting Dak back, re-signing him.
Dak over Dalton, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, getting him back from the cramp, getting him back healthy, and also re-signing him to the monster contract and him actually being there again, as opposed to, the potential that he hits free agency, the potential that it was going to be on a franchise tag or whatever. Getting Dak back in that building is the biggest addition that this team is going to have from last year to this year.
Yeah, it certainly, obviously it is. A quarterback's going to be the answer a lot here. We're trying to skew away from too much of just the quarterback discussion. But
he
will be.
Not many quarterbacks.
Anytime a team added a quarterback, that's probably going to be the answer. There's some debate
Sometimes.
in a few other spots.
It's not all,
But that has to be the answer here.
Yeah.
I think at a macro view, too, just like a healthy offensive line. I've cheated. It's not one addition, but just having all those guys back. If Tyron Smith is healthy, our offensive tackle rankings are out today at PFF.com. Yeah, Dak for Dallas. Definitely agree there. How about the New York Giants?
So
the Giants just added a lot to their receiving core, and I think that's the way you go. This is the year 3 test for Daniel Jones.
Yeah.
Assuming that the offensive line still has to creep back toward average. It's good to be back. Creep back toward average up front, and if they do that,
it's got a way to go.
Kenny Golladay, Adoree Jackson. Kenny Golladay and Kadarius Toney, Kyle Rudolph, all those weapons. But they also added Adoree Jackson at corner. There's a lot of good players there.
Yeah, Golladay feels like the biggest addition. That's the one I think that could have the most obvious impact. Golladay, his last year, his big thing was contested catches for Matthew Stafford. If Daniel Jones leans on him the same way and exploits the other guys in a different way and as part of the offense, but Golladay becomes his sort of when in doubt contested catch guy, that could have the biggest impact on what Daniel Jones does this year, who I think is progressing to the point of being massively underrated at this stage. His touchdown numbers were tiny last year.
Massively underrated?
Yeah, because people are like, Dak had more touchdowns than Daniel Jones last year. Ergo, Daniel Jones sucks. Daniel Jones played better than that touchdown number and the meme of Dak having more.
Daniel Jones is still Nick Foles. My Nick Foles comparison
he's not.
Stands. He's had 1 year, because last year at this time we were like, man, just get off the Daniel Jones hype train. He had a few good games. He had a few of those because the touchdowns were there in 2019 as a rookie. He had a 67 grade that year, better stats, and better highlight reel type of games. 4 touchdowns, no picks. He had 3 of them, right? And then last year, the supporting cast was maybe the worst in the entire NFL when you combine the pressure that he was under plus the receivers. It was up there with Darnold and the Jets and the whole thing. So he's just rated. He's where he is. He's a lower mid-tier quarterback who's going to probably look better this year because of the most important offseason additions, which are those 2 wide receivers, Kenny Golladay, and I'm going to say Kadarius Toney may be the most important addition because Jason Garrett's the offensive play caller. Is Kadarius Toney, his addition, going to add some creativity to Jason Garrett in his play calling? Yeah. Is that going to force his hand a little bit? It
either needs to, or Toney needs to be able to take one of those established jobs and, become a more conventional receiver than he's been so far in his career, which I think is definitely possible. The way he developed, he certainly can be on that pathway and be a good player. But again, it feels a little bit like Kyle Pitts or Rondale Moore. If you're going to use this guy to the fullest of his potential, you need to be able to get creative with him in addition to the other stuff.
All right, let's go to the Philadelphia Eagles. Most important offseason addition. Where are you going with this one with the Eagles?
I think it's probably Devontae Smith coming in. The Eagles did need a big receiver somewhere. I think that receiving core is probably better than it looked because everything was a mess last year, and I think it's capable of more than it was shown. But I think Devontae Smith, if he's as good as he looked in college, could completely transform that.
What about Nick Sirianni coming in as head coach?
It's definitely a significant move. You could definitely argue that's the most important one because that guy is going to be running the franchise from this point, right? comes over, replaces Doug Peterson, who did a great job overall, won them a Super Bowl, had everything moving in the right direction, and then cataclysmically fell out with Howie over Carson Wentz, and the whole thing unspiraled.
Yeah, the Eagles looked like an up-and-coming franchise that, came up and won a championship in 2017, and it's pretty much been all downhill since that point. So I think Sirianni, changing what, I don't want to say changing the culture, but just changing the trajectory. But that's more of a long-term play there. And obviously, I think as a player, I'm with you on Devontae Smith. Washington football team. I almost said their old name because it's been a while. I'm a little rusty here coming off the beach. And I lost my voice somehow since yesterday. It has nothing to do with the trip. Washington football team, most important player. They've added a ton in free agency. We liked their draft. We've liked a lot of what they've done. Who's the most important person in Washington?
I think it's adding Fitz. I think
just for this year.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it has to be.
But not necessarily just for this year. I mean, I was on a Washington podcast recently where I was like, look, they've done what we talked about. They look to be executing this 90s Minnesota Vikings strategy where we're just going to deal with quarterback one step at a time, right? We don't have any long-term vision for this position. We're going to maintain a good roster. We're going to try and be as competitive as humanly possible, and we are going to deal with quarterback as and when the time comes. For now, it's Ryan Fitzpatrick. Maybe next year, it's Taylor Heineke. Maybe it's neither of those guys. Maybe the year after that, it's Marcus Mariota or Jared Goff. It's going to be somebody like that, and we're just going to keep going until we stumble into an opportunity to go in a different direction, right? The Vikings for like a decade bumbled through with this collection of veteran quarterbacks until eventually they got put in a position where they could draft Dante Culpepper, and now we're good. Like that, I think, is how Washington are going to deal with this. And I think it's not a bad idea.
So Fitz, I agree on Fitz. Part of it's by default too, right? They were good enough. Their roster didn't seem good last year. Some guys improved. Ron Rivera tied it all together. They were a much better team. I don't want to have complete revisionist history here like Washington was some sort of powerhouse last year. They were a one-sided defensive team. That was what it was. They won the division despite their quarterback play. So that is But
remember how much better they got just from going from like absolute disaster at quarterback play to not good, but all right. Like Alex Smith came in, was 5-1 as a starter, despite not even playing very well, but he played viably, right? Which was a huge jump. Ryan Fitzpatrick should play significantly better than Alex Smith did last year, and they've added players around him.
That should be a podcast in and of itself. We're kind of anti-QB wins as a company, though I've come around to the point through the years that I think wins aren't that much worse than other second-tier stats over time. So Alex Smith being 5-1 as a starter, really interesting because, he didn't play all that great. But he's got a history of doing that. Like he's had seasons where he's gone 13. The games that he started.
The game
teams
manager
have gone 13
style.
and 3, 11 and 4, 11 and 5, 11 and 4. He was 99 and 67 in his career.
The game manager style of quarterback, I think, probably gives you a very high floor, right? We always talk about which moves the needle, but it caps you. Like you can only be so good if your quarterback is game manager only, and most teams don't like that because eventually you're going to come up against a better team and you can't beat that team unless your quarterback has the best game of his career, and timing that for your best opposition at the right time is really hard. So Alex Smith playing at that level, he's like the perfect, it's almost like, we joked before about Thomas Jones was an offensive line calibration tool because that guy would get you exactly what was blocked and nothing more. Alex Smith is almost like, an offense calibration tool. He comes in, runs his offense, does the, game manager style. He'll get you exactly what the offense is designed and capable to do, but he's not going to do anything more because he doesn't put the ball in the air, doesn't put the ball down the field. But if your offense was a mess because your starter was just a disaster, Smith can come in and show you what it actually is, and then you can figure out where you need to go to find a better quarterback than that.
But we're going to keep going back to that discussion. So Washington, Ryan Fitzpatrick.